They said a woman could rule Hollywood, until she refused to play by their rules. The Golden Age was a time when ambition could open doors, but controversy could slam them shut forever. What happened to the stars who dared to defy the studios, the censors, and society itself? Behind every ban is a story of rebellion, risk, and a price paid in silence. And sometimes, the real drama isn't what made the headlines, it's what was never meant to be told. Hedi Lamar. For years, Hedi Lamar was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, a title Hollywood used to sell her image while hiding the truth of her rebellious spirit. An Austrian émigré who stunned audiences in Algiers and Samson and Delilah, Lamar possessed an intellect that unsettled the industry's powerful men. Far from the silent beauty studios wanted her to be, Lamar was a genuine inventor. Alongside composer George Antheil, she helped create frequency-hopping technology, a precursor to Wi-Fi. But Hollywood saw her scientific achievements as a nuisance, not a selling point, quietly brushing them aside. Her private life only added to her reputation as a woman unwilling to be controlled. Whispers about secret wartime missions, ties to European intelligence, and scandalous affairs with prominent men filled gossip columns. But it was Lamar's defiance of the studio system that sealed her fate. She openly criticized the hypocrisy of MGM, walked out on contracts when she felt exploited, and spoke her mind on issues other actresses kept quiet about. Studio heads, wary of her unpredictability and unwillingness to play by their rules, decided she was too much trouble. There was no official blacklist, just a silent agreement. Suddenly, the phone stopped ringing for major roles. Her face vanished from movie posters, and the films offered to her grew fewer and farther between. Lamar became a warning to other women. Brains and beauty might win you fame, but independence could exile you from Hollywood's inner circle. Her story stands as a reminder that in Tinseltown, being extraordinary was sometimes the biggest threat of all. Lamar's legacy today is not just her beauty, but her courage to defy the system, and the price she paid for it. Ingrid Bergman. When Ingrid Bergman arrived in Hollywood, she was the very image of innocence, her luminous face and natural style setting her apart in an industry built on illusions. Audiences fell in love with her in Casablanca and Gaslight, and Hollywood eagerly promoted her as the embodiment of purity and virtue. But when Bergman's real life began to clash with her manufactured image, the backlash was immediate and vicious. Her passionate affair with Italian director Roberto Rossellini, while still married, and the mother of a young daughter's, off a national firestorm. What followed was more than a typical Hollywood scandal. It became a public reckoning. Bergman's pregnancy by Rossellini was condemned from pulpits and podiums alike. American churches called for boycotts, and a U.S. senator denounced her as a powerful influence for evil on the Senate floor. Studios, desperate to avoid controversy, swiftly dropped her from their rosters. In a country that had once idolized her, Bergman was now reviled as a threat to American morals. Her films disappeared from theaters, and she found herself blacklisted from Hollywood's inner circle for nearly a decade. Forced to work in Europe, Bergman continued to shine artistically, collaborating with Rossellini on a series of acclaimed but polarizing films. Yet in the American press, she became a symbol of foreign decadence and betrayal. Only after her Oscar-winning return in Anastasia was she cautiously accepted back into the fold. But the scars remained. For Bergman, the experience was a harsh lesson. No matter your talent, Hollywood could turn on you in an instant if you defied its strict codes. Her ban stands as a stark reminder of how quickly the Dream Factory could transform a saint into a scapegoat. Jean Sabberg. Jean Sabberg's story is a haunting reminder of how quickly Hollywood could erase even its brightest stars if they strayed outside the lines. Plucked from obscurity as a teenager by Otto Preminger to play St. Joan, Sabberg was thrust into the spotlight with almost no warning. Her beauty and talent should have guaranteed her a long Hollywood career. But it was her politics, not her performances, that sealed her fate. Sabberg's passionate support for civil rights, especially her outspoken alliance with the Black Panther Party, placed her firmly in the crosshairs of a paranoid America. It wasn't just the studio executives who turned on her. The full weight of the U.S. government was brought to bear. The FBI, under its infamous COINTELPRO program, launched a relentless smear campaign against her. They planted fabricated stories in tabloids, insinuating affairs, and even falsely claiming Sabberg was pregnant by a Black Panther member. These lies devastated her personal life and destroyed her reputation. Hollywood, always skittish about controversy, quickly backed away. Studios that once courted her suddenly ignored her calls, and major roles disappeared. Sabberg was quietly blacklisted, not with a public announcement, but with a wall of silence and vanished opportunities. Finding little support in her home country, Sabberg found refuge and respect in France, where she became a cinematic icon with Breathless and other new wave classics. Yet, back in America, she remained a warning. Women who challenged the status quo, especially in the volatile climate of the 1960s, risked not only their careers, but their very sense of self. By the time of her tragic and mysterious death, Jean Sabberg's name was synonymous with the brutal cost of defiance. Her legacy endures as both a tragedy and a rallying cry for artistic freedom and political courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Anna May Wong. Anna May Wong should have been a Hollywood queen. Instead, her career is one of the starkest tragedies of institutional racism in classic film. Born to Chinese immigrant parents, Wong possessed a rare charisma and undeniable talent, lighting up the screen in classics like Shanghai Express. Yet, from the start, she was boxed in by the industry's bigotry. Outdated laws forbade her from romantic scenes with white co-stars, and even when Hollywood craved exotic faces, they wouldn't let her lead stories about her own culture. The defining blow came when Wong was denied the starring role in The Good Earth, a film centered on Chinese characters, because the part went to a white actress in yellowface. Outraged, Wong spoke out publicly, calling attention to Hollywood's hypocrisy and challenging both the studios and the censors who enforced these humiliating rules. But her courage came at a steep price. Studios quietly blacklisted her, and the major roles she deserved were handed to others. The offers dwindled, and her name slipped from the marquees. Though Wong managed to find some success in Europe, Hollywood's unofficial ban left her sidelined and heartbroken. She became a symbol of the doors slammed shut on talented women of color. Her story is a cautionary tale that echoed through generations. Anna May Wong's legacy is now recognized as both a warning and an inspiration, a rallying cry for every performer who refuses to be erased. Her struggle exposed the ugly truths behind the industry's golden facade and ensured that her name, once silenced, would never be forgotten again. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge shattered Hollywood's glass ceilings with a grace that demanded attention and punishment. As the first black woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, her role in Carmen Jones should have marked the beginning of a luminous career. But Dandridge refused to play by the unspoken rules of the industry, turning down demeaning, stereotypical roles and openly challenging the racism she faced on set and in public. She insisted on dignity and equality, walking out of projects that didn't respect her, and confronting segregation wherever she found it. Her personal life became just as controversial as her career choices. Dandridge's relationships with white men, including director Otto Preminger, were sensationalized in the press and sparked outrage in an America still shackled by segregation. For studio heads, desperate to keep conservative audiences and Southern theater owners happy, Dandridge's independence became a liability. Without a word, Hollywood began to blacklist her. Promised roles evaporated, and her phone stopped ringing for major projects. She was pushed into smaller, often exploitative parts that barely hinted at her true talent. Financial troubles soon followed, compounded by betrayal from crooked managers and mounting debts. The woman who'd once symbolized hope for black performers found herself isolated and erased from the spotlight she'd fought so hard to reach. By the end of her life, Dandridge was a haunting figure, her achievements overshadowed by struggle and heartbreak. Yet today, her story stands as a powerful indictment of an industry that could lift a star up only to shut her out for daring to claim her place. Dorothy Dandridge's legacy is one of courage and loss, a reminder of Hollywood's unforgiving double standards. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton's rise and fall is the stuff of Hollywood nightmares, tabloid headlines wrapped around a human tragedy. In the early 1950s, Payton seemed destined for stardom. A blonde bombshell with raw charisma, she scored a coveted contract with Universal and drew attention with films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. But behind the scenes, her personal life slipped into chaos. Payton's tumultuous romances, especially the notorious triangle with actors Tom Neal and Franchot Tone, exploded into violence when Neal brutally assaulted Tone, leaving him hospitalized and the press ravenous for scandal. Rather than supporting her through the public storm, Hollywood's gatekeepers slammed the door. Studio heads branded her morally unfit, and gossip columns delighted in painting Payton as reckless and self-destructive. Every misstep became front-page news, reinforcing a narrative of decline. Instead of sympathy, the industry issued an unspoken ban. Offers for major roles dried up overnight, and Payton found herself cast aside by the very system that had built her up. The only scripts she could land were for low-rent exploitation pictures, far from the bright lights of her early promise. As Payton's career disintegrated, her struggles with addiction and poverty became cruelly public. Once a symbol of Hollywood glamour, she was reduced to tabloid fodder, her life unraveling in real time, while the studios that once courted her remained conspicuously silent. By her 30s, Payton was alone, destitute, and shunned by the industry she'd once conquered. Her story became a whispered cautionary tale, proof that for women in Golden Age Hollywood, one wrong turn could mean exile, and the Dream Factory could become a machine for erasure. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer's story is one of classic Hollywood's greatest heartbreaks, a tale where brilliance met brutality. Her early performances, radiating an unfiltered honesty and intensity, won her critical acclaim and positioned her as one of the most promising stars of her generation. Yet Farmer's independent spirit quickly put her at odds with the studio system. She refused to play the obedient starlet, speaking out against industry hypocrisy and challenging studio executives whenever she saw fit. This defiance, paired with whispers about drinking and erratic behavior, made her an easy target for gossip and suspicion. As her nonconformity grew more public, Hollywood responded with quiet but devastating efficiency. Roles disappeared, and Farmer's name was quietly removed from casting lists, effectively blacklisting her without a word. Her personal struggles were relentlessly sensationalized in the press, and her mental health battles became a national spectacle. Following a series of public outbursts and arrests, Farmer was institutionalized, where she later claimed to have endured severe mistreatment. Even after her release, the industry's doors stayed shut. Farmer's attempts to return to acting were met with cold indifference, the blacklist following her wherever she went. Her talent and courage were overshadowed by the narrative of her downfall, a warning for any woman who dared to rebel. Frances Farmer's legacy is a stark reminder that, in Golden Age Hollywood, independence was dangerous, especially for women. Her banishment proved that no matter how luminous the talent, the price of defiance was often exile, and Hollywood was never shy about making an example of a woman who refused to fall in line. Marsha Hunt. Marsha Hunt's name is rarely spotlighted in Hollywood retrospectives. But her life epitomizes how political paranoia could derail even the brightest careers. In the 1940s, Hunt was one of the industry's most promising young actresses, starring in films like Pride and Prejudice and Raw Deal. Off-screen, she was admired for her integrity and her advocacy for civil rights and humanitarian causes. But as McCarthyism gripped America, those same qualities turned her into a target. Hunt's crime was standing up for civil liberties and refusing to distance herself from friends and colleagues who were accused, often baselessly, of communist sympathies. When her name appeared in red channels, the infamous pamphlet that blacklisted supposed subversives, the effect was immediate and devastating. Studios, petrified of government scrutiny and the threat of negative headlines, stopped offering her roles. Practically overnight, the career she'd carefully built vanished. Despite her tireless efforts to clear her name and decades of charitable work, Hunt found herself locked out by the industry she once helped define. She turned to theater and activism, but the doors of Hollywood remained closed for years. Only much later was her courage and talent formally acknowledged. But by then, her prime had passed, and the harm could not be undone. Marsha Hunt's story is a sobering testament to the power of political hysteria in erasing even the most principled artists. Her unofficial ban serves as a reminder of how quickly Hollywood could punish women for convictions that, in another era, might have made them heroes. Lena Horn. Lena Horn's career is both a triumph and a tragedy, a testament to talent stifled by Hollywood's racism. As one of the first black actresses to sign a major studio contract, Horn brought a rare combination of beauty, charisma, and vocal power to the screen. But she was more than just a performer. Horn was outspoken, insisting on respect, and refusing the degrading roles typically assigned to black women. She demanded dignity, challenging stereotypes in every script offered. This refusal to know her place put Horn at odds with the studio system. Instead of rewarding her, executives quietly sidelined her. Major roles vanished, replaced by brief musical numbers in films, sequences designed to be easily cut when movies played in the segregated South. Meanwhile, Horn's civil rights activism drew even more scrutiny. She publicly denounced segregation, marched alongside leaders of the movement, and spoke out against injustice whenever she could. This made her a target for both Southern theater owners, who threatened boycotts, and the studios themselves, who saw her as difficult. Behind the glamour, contracts lapsed without warning, and projects she'd been promised disappeared. Horn's push for equality cost her dearly in Hollywood. By the time the industry began to recognize her courage, the best years of her career had already passed. Lena Horn is now rightly honored as a pioneer, but her story is a stark reminder of how Hollywood punished those who challenged its barriers. In her prime, Horn paid a heavy price for demanding change. Her legacy built as much on resistance as on undeniable talent. Hazel Scott. Hazel Scott's dazzling talent and fierce independence should have secured her a permanent place among Hollywood legends. Born in Trinidad and raised in Harlem, Scott was a piano prodigy by her teens, conquering concert halls and Broadway before making her way to Hollywood. She brought both sophistication and energy to the screen in films like Something to Shout About and I Doed It, captivating audiences with her virtuoso playing and unmistakable charisma. But Scott refused to play by Hollywood's prejudiced rules. She adamantly rejected roles that demanded she embody racial stereotypes, and she walked off sets rather than compromise her dignity or that of her all-black band. Scott's insistence on equality quickly drew the ire of the industry and, at the height of the Red Scare, caught the attention of the House Un-American Activities Committee. In 1950, she was summoned to testify. Scott's testimony was bold and principled. She condemned the blacklist as a tool of injustice. Hollywood, however, was unforgiving. Studios, terrified of bad publicity, dropped her from their rosters. Her pioneering television show, the first ever hosted by a black woman, was abruptly canceled. With her American career destroyed, Scott relocated to Europe, where she continued to perform, but never regained the stardom she'd achieved in the U.S. Her story is both an inspiration and a warning. Hazel Scott refused to be silent or compliant, even when it cost her everything. She stands as a symbol of artistic integrity and the heavy price paid for challenging the system during Hollywood's darkest era. Gail Russell. Gail Russell's rise to fame seemed almost fairy tale perfect, but her story quickly took on the contours of a classic Hollywood tragedy. Discovered as a shy teenager and thrust into stardom by Paramount, Russell's haunting beauty and emotional vulnerability made her a standout in films like The Uninvited and Angel and the Bad Man. Yet Russell's intense stage fright and social anxiety became debilitating as the pressure of celebrity grew. To steady her nerves, she turned to alcohol, a dependency that would ultimately destroy her reputation and career. Her off-screen troubles soon spilled into public view. Russell was repeatedly arrested for driving under the influence. Her mugshot splashed across newspapers. Studios that once groomed her for greatness now saw her as a liability. With every new scandal, the phone calls stopped, the scripts dried up, and Paramount quietly canceled her contract. Russell's attempts at a comeback were sabotaged by relentless media coverage of her alcoholism and courtroom appearances. By her early 30s, the actress once heralded as the next big thing was effectively blacklisted. She died young and alone, her name remembered more for the cautionary whispers that echoed through the studio gates than for the artistry she brought to the screen. Gail Russell's ban wasn't a formal decree. It was the industry's unspoken judgment on a woman who broke under pressure. A reminder that Hollywood's tolerance for vulnerability ended the moment it stopped selling tickets. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's life is a haunting testament to Hollywood's capacity for both creation and destruction. Catapulted into stardom as a child, Garland's every move was controlled by studio executives obsessed with her image. MGM forced her into extreme diets, handed her amphetamines to curb her appetite and keep her working around the clock, and relentlessly criticized her appearance, all while projecting her as the innocent girl next door. These pressures fueled Garland's lifelong battles with addiction, anxiety, and depression, issues that were both exploited by the media and weaponized against her by the industry. As she grew older, Garland's private struggles began to spill over into her professional life. Missed rehearsals, emotional outbursts, and conflicts with directors became tabloid fodder, eroding her once pristine reputation. Studios that had made millions from her talent now branded her as difficult and unreliable. MGM ultimately terminated her contract after repeated on-set issues, and other studios followed suit, canceling projects and quietly refusing to cast her in leading roles. Despite a few remarkable comebacks, most notably her Oscar-nominated performance in A Star is Born, the shadow of the blacklist lingered. Garland was forced to turn to the stage, where her raw emotional power drew sold-out crowds, but did little to heal the wounds left by her film career's collapse. Her unofficial ban remained in place until her untimely death at just 47. Today, Judy Garland is remembered as an icon whose extraordinary gifts came at an unimaginable cost. Her story, a powerful indictment of an industry that could exalt a star and then banish her when she needed it most. Lupe Veles. Lupe Veles's story is one of explosive talent and tragic consequences, a cautionary tale etched into the shadows of old Hollywood. Hailing from Mexico, Veles burst onto the American film scene with an irrepressible force, earning fame as the Mexican Spitfire for her bold, fiery presence on screen. Audiences adored her vivacity, but studio executives found her impossible to control. Veles flatly rejected the limiting, often racist roles Hollywood wanted to confine her to, demanding respect and authentic representation at a time when such defiance from a Latina actress was virtually unheard of. Her determination to challenge stereotypes made her a target. Veles was vocal about discrimination, clashing with producers and writers over scripts that caricatured her heritage. Her personal life, filled with passionate affairs, bitter breakups, and public spats, became tabloid gold. Instead of shielding her, the studios weaponized her reputation for unpredictability, feeding the narrative that she was unmanageable and too wild for their carefully manicured image of stardom. Hollywood's response was swift but silent. Veles saw her roles shrink and contracts vanish. Major projects were offered to others, and whispers of her difficult nature followed her everywhere. By her early 30s, Veles was largely sidelined, her extraordinary talent stifled by the very system that had once celebrated her. Her untimely and tragic death at 36, clouded by rumors and sensationalism, cemented her status as a legend and a cautionary example. Lupe Veles's unofficial ban served as a warning to any woman, especially women of color, who dared to rebel. Her legacy is both inspiring and heartbreaking, a testament to barriers broken and the steep price paid for challenging Hollywood's narrow rules. Tula Bankhead. Tula Bankhead was a force of nature, her gravelly voice, razor wit, and electric presence making her unforgettable on both stage and screen. But Hollywood, with its rigid codes and obsession with image, never knew what to do with someone as unapologetically unconventional as Bankhead. She openly flouted every rule. Her bisexuality was an open secret. She drank and used drugs with abandon, and she delighted in shocking the establishment with her language and her lifestyle. While audiences found her magnetic, studio executives and censors bristled at her refusal to play the part of the demure leading lady. Bankhead's career began with great promise, her performances crackling with energy and unpredictability. But her off-screen antics quickly overshadowed her talent in the eyes of the industry. She entertained lovers, male and female, in her dressing room, swore without hesitation, and ridiculed any attempt to control her behavior. Hollywood's reaction was swift but silent. Film roles evaporated, contracts disappeared, and Bankhead was effectively exiled from the movie business by the mid-1940s. Left out of the studio system, Bankhead reinvented herself on stage and radio, where her audacity was often celebrated rather than condemned. Yet the unofficial Hollywood ban held firm. Her name rarely appeared on marquee lists, and the big screen was all but closed to her. Despite this, Bankhead's legacy endured. She became a legend precisely because she refused to be anything but herself. In an era obsessed with conformity, Tula Bankhead's story remains a bold reminder of what it cost to be authentically and fearlessly different in classic Hollywood. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks is remembered as one of silent cinema's most unforgettable faces. Her sleek bob, enigmatic beauty, and magnetic presence making her a flapper icon for the ages. Yet behind her, allure lies the story of a Hollywood exile, a band that was as much about her independence as her talent. Brooks burst onto the scene with roles in classics like Pandora's Box and Diary of a Lost Girl, captivating audiences and critics alike. But Brooks was never interested in playing Hollywood's game. She refused to sign restrictive long-term contracts, rejected scripts she found dull or demeaning, and spoke openly about the hypocrisy, sexism, and exploitation she witnessed behind the scenes. Studio executives, unused to such defiance from a young actress, quickly turned on her. Brooks declined to participate in fake romances or publicity stunts, and she rebuffed advances from powerful men, actions that, in Golden Age Hollywood, were career suicide. When she left for Europe and later demanded fair pay to return, the response from Hollywood's gatekeepers was cold and final. Doors slammed shut, roles vanished, and her name was scrubbed from casting lists. For decades, Brooks was forced into obscurity, working odd jobs while her films slowly became the stuff of legend. Only years later did critics and historians recognize her as a pioneer, a woman whose refusal to be controlled paved the way for later generations. Louise Brooks's unofficial ban serves as a stark warning. In classic Hollywood, true independence was rarely forgiven. Her story is a testament to how quickly the industry could erase even its brightest stars when they dared to walk away from the system. Mercedes McCambridge. Mercedes McCambridge was a force of nature, a gravel-voiced, powerhouse actress who won an Academy Award for her first film, All the King's Men. Her reputation as the world's greatest living radio actress preceded her in Hollywood. But in the feverish climate of the 1950s, her career collided with the full force of the Red Scare. McCambridge, a passionate advocate for civil rights and progressive causes, was named in the infamous Red Channels pamphlet, which listed supposed communist sympathizers in the entertainment industry. Unlike some of her male peers, who were able to work their way back in through public rehabilitation, McCambridge's fate was more severe. She refused to name names or betray colleagues to the House Un-American Activities Committee, a stance that put her on the unofficial blacklist. Studios dropped her from projects, radio shows replaced her with less controversial talent, and film offers all but vanished. Even as she turned to the stage, and later found some redemption in television and voice acting, including the demon's voice in The Exorcist, Hollywood never fully forgave her for her defiance. The ban wasn't about talent, it was about obedience. McCambridge's legacy is a stark lesson in the high cost of holding on to your principles in an industry that demanded conformity. While her later career was marked by smaller victories, the blacklist ensured she'd never reclaim the full stature she once held. She remains a symbol of the many women who lost everything simply for standing by their beliefs. Patricia Neal. Patricia Neal's career began with the kind of promise that makes Hollywood legends. Her early performances were lauded by critics, and she quickly secured major roles that showcased her formidable talent and on-screen magnetism. But Neal's personal life soon collided with the rigid morality of the era. Her affair with Gary Cooper, a married megastar, sparked public outrage and relentless tabloid scrutiny. Studio executives, ever wary of controversy that could hurt box office returns, started to quietly pull away. The press labeled Neal a homewrecker, and the Whisper campaign worked. Leading roles evaporated, and she was unofficially banned from the kinds of projects that could have made her a household name. The blacklist was more than just professional, it was deeply personal. Neal endured devastating tragedies, including the loss of a child and multiple strokes that left her fighting for her life and her voice. For years, she was all but invisible in the industry that had once seemed ready to embrace her. Yet Neal's story is also one of resilience. Her astonishing comeback, culminating in an Oscar for her performance in HUD, proved her talent was impossible to erase, even if Hollywood tried. Still, the scars of exile never fully healed. Neal's journey is a powerful example of how quickly the industry could turn on its brightest stars when private life clashed with public image. Her eventual return was triumphant, but the years spent in forced obscurity are a reminder that, in Hollywood, redemption is rare and always comes at a price. Gene Tierney. Gene Tierney's dazzling presence in films like Laura and Leave Her to Heaven made her a household name, but her life off-screen was marked by pain that Hollywood refused to forgive. Behind the glamour, Tierney endured personal tragedy, including the birth of a daughter with severe disabilities, a result of a fan-breaking quarantine, and infecting Tierney with rubella during pregnancy. The heartbreak, compounded by a string of tumultuous relationships, including a widely gossiped affair with John F. Kennedy, put Tierney under a harsh spotlight. But what truly doomed her career in Hollywood's eyes was her mental health. As rumors swirled about psychiatric hospitalizations and suicide attempts, studio heads, obsessed with maintaining the facade of perfection, began to view Tierney as a liability. Contracts lapsed, roles vanished, and her name faded from casting lists without any public announcement. Tierney's disappearance from the screen was total, driven by an industry terrified of any hint of weakness in its stars. When Tierney attempted a return, she found the stigma impossible to shake. Doors that once swung wide now remained firmly closed. Her willingness to speak openly about her struggles later in life was ahead of its time, but during her prime, honesty was punished with exile. Gene Tierney's unofficial ban reveals how Golden Age Hollywood demanded its stars be flawless, and how quickly it cast aside anyone who dared to show vulnerability. Her story is a sobering reminder of the cost of authenticity in an industry built on the illusion of perfection. Elizabeth Scott. Elizabeth Scott, with her smoky voice and icy cool, seemed made for the shadows of film noir. She was magnetic in classics like Dead Reckoning and Too Late for Tears, building a reputation as one of Hollywood's true femme fatales. But the real shadows in Scott's life came not from her screen roles, but from the industry's hunger for scandal. In the 1950s, her name appeared in Confidential magazine, the tabloid infamous for destroying careers, with lurid stories about her alleged relationships with women. At a time when even the whisper of homosexuality was enough to ruin a career, the damage was swift and merciless. Studios, desperate to avoid controversy and terrified of public backlash, responded by quietly freezing Scott out. Promised scripts were suddenly unavailable, and her name disappeared from casting calls and major industry parties. There was no official statement, no dramatic announcement, just a slow, systematic erasure. Though Scott fought back through lawsuits and never publicly confirmed or denied the rumors, the stain was impossible to remove. Her talent and star power couldn't overcome Hollywood's deep-rooted prejudice. She was left with bit parts and B-movies. Her days as a leading lady cut short not by failure, but by innuendo and fear. Elizabeth Scott's quiet banishment is a classic example of how gossip and intolerance could exile even a proven star. Her story stands as a stark warning of how little it took to go from marquee to margin in Hollywood's golden age, especially for women who didn't fit the era's narrow mold. Jane Greer. Jane Greer's legacy in Hollywood is indelibly tied to her unforgettable role in Out of the Past, where her cool allure helped define the femme fatale archetype. Yet, what many fans don't realize is how abruptly her promising film career was cut short, not by personal scandal, but by the vengeful machinations of Howard Hughes, one of the industry's most influential and unpredictable moguls. Greer, known for her independence and refusal to be controlled, rejected Hughes's romantic advances and pushed back against his obsessive oversight of her career. In a town where powerful men pulled all the strings, her defiance came at a steep price. Hughes owned her contract and wielded his influence with ruthless precision. He sabotaged her professional opportunities, canceling projects she was attached to, spreading damaging rumors, and quietly warning other studios and producers against hiring her. The blacklist wasn't official, but it was absolute. Everyone in Hollywood understood that working with Jane Greer meant risking Hughes's wrath. As a result, leading roles evaporated, and Greer's name became noticeably absent from big studio productions. Despite her immense talent, Greer was forced to reinvent herself, eventually finding a second act in television and low-budget films. The full scope of her stardom was never realized, her rise stunted by one powerful man's vendetta. Greer's story remains a cautionary tale about the dark side of Hollywood's golden age. In an industry built on illusion and influence, crossing the wrong person could erase even the brightest stars from the marquee. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake became an instant icon in the 1940s. Her peekaboo hairstyle immortalized in film noir classics like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia. For a time, Lake was Hollywood's hottest commodity. Her sultry looks, mysterious aura, and cool confidence seemed tailor-made for the silver screen. But just as quickly as she rose, Lake found herself ostracized, her once golden status tarnished by a combination of bad luck, industry politics, and personal rebellion. Lake earned a reputation for being difficult, late arrivals, on-set clashes with directors and co-stars, and a tendency to speak her mind in an era when actresses were expected to be compliant. The studio bosses who had once adored her began to see her as a liability, especially after her public feuds with fellow actors, like Alan Ladd, became gossip column fodder. Even her unique hairstyle, initially a boon, eventually drew the ire of the U.S. government during World War II, who blamed it for workplace accidents among female factory workers copying the trend. Studio heads, always fearful of bad press and eager to maintain control, quietly but systematically pulled Lake from major projects. As roles dried up, rumors circulated that she was unmanageable, an alcoholic, and a troublemaker, a narrative that took on a life of its own. By her early 30s, Veronica Lake had become persona non grata in Hollywood. The doors that once swung open for her now slammed shut. Attempts at comebacks were sabotaged by the lingering stigma, and Lake spent her later years far from the spotlight, working ordinary jobs and battling poverty. Her legacy, once inseparable from the glamour of film noir, became a stark reminder of Hollywood's ruthless nature, a place where one's status could change overnight, and where banishment was as much about controlling the narrative as it was about punishing actual misdeeds. Veronica Lake's fall stands as a cautionary tale for any star who dares to step outside the boundaries set by the Hollywood establishment. Beneath the glitz of classic Hollywood, these 21 women proved that real courage meant risking everything, even their place in the spotlight. Their bans weren't just punishment. They were warnings written into the very fabric of the industry. Yet the legacy of these actresses isn't defined by the doors slammed shut, but by the boldness that refused to be silenced. Their stories echo through film history, reminding us that controversy fades, but true defiance leaves a mark that can never be erased.